My name is Emma, and the day my brother laughed at my dreams was the same day I decided his opinion would never matter to me again. Have you ever been told you're not enough by the one person who was supposed to believe in you? Let me back up. I grew up in the kind of family where success had a very specific definition. My father was a corporate lawyer, the kind who wore Italian suits and spoke in quarterly earnings. My mother hosted charity galas and measured worth in square footage. And then there was my brother, Daniel, golden boy, Yale graduate, investment banker, and the person my parents pointed to whenever they introduced me to someone new. This is our daughter, Emma, they'd say, and then quickly add, and our son Daniel works at Goldman Sachs. I was the afterthought, the one who chose community college over an Ivy League, the one who started a small marketing consultancy from my one-bedroom apartment instead of climbing some corporate ladder, the one who believed that helping local businesses tell their stories mattered, even if it didn't come with a corner office. Daniel never missed an opportunity to remind me of my place. At family dinners, he'd ask about my little hobby, with that condescending smile. When I mentioned landing a new client, he'd nod absently and change the subject to his latest bonus. When I bought my first used car with money I'd actually earned, he laughed and said, "Let me know when you're ready for a real vehicle." But the worst came 2 years ago at our parents' 40th anniversary party. I'd just signed my 10th client, a local bakery that wanted to expand their online presence. I was proud. I'd worked 16-hour days to get there, learning web design, social media strategy, SEO, everything I could teach myself because I couldn't afford to hire help. I made the mistake of mentioning it. Daniel was holding court near the bar, surrounded by his equally polished friends and his wife Michelle, a woman who wore her ambition like armour and her judgment like perfume. Too much of both. 10 clients, Daniel announced loudly enough for half the room to hear. That's adorable, Em. I have lunch meetings worth more than your entire annual revenue. The group laughed. Not mean laughter, really. Just that casual dismissiveness that comes from people who've never had to build something from nothing. Michelle touched his arm, smiling. Daniel, be nice. Everyone has to start somewhere, even if some people stay there. I felt my face burn. My mother glanced over with that look, the one that said, "Please don't make a scene." My father was already deep in conversation with someone more important. I stood there, holding my wine glass, feeling exactly as small as they wanted me to feel. I didn't make a scene. I smiled tightly, excused myself, and spent the rest of the night in the garden, swallowing my humiliation with expensive champagne I didn't even want. That night, I made myself a promise. Not a dramatic vow of revenge or anything theatrical. Just a simple, quiet commitment. I would build something so undeniable that they'd choke on their condescension. Not for them, for me. I threw myself into my work with a focus that bordered on obsession. I stopped going to family dinners where I'd be reduced to a punchline. I stopped posting on social media about my wins because I didn't need their empty likes. I just worked. I studied competitor strategies until 2 a.m. I took courses on branding, analytics, client psychology. I reached out to businesses that had been told they were too small to matter and showed them they weren't. My consultancy grew. 10 clients became 20. 20 became 50. I hired my first employee, then my second, then my fifth. I moved from my apartment to a small office space, then to a larger one. I stopped calling it a consultancy and registered as an agency, Bloom Marketing and Brand Strategy. The name felt right. Something about growth, about starting small and becoming impossible to ignore. Within 18 months, we'd handled campaigns for 3 national brands that wanted an authentic touch. Within 2 years, we'd won a regional business award. Within 2.5 years, I'd stopped tracking Daniel's LinkedIn because I didn't need the comparison anymore. My parents started mentioning my business at dinner parties. Not proudly, not yet, but in that surprised tone people use when their low expectations get challenged. Emma's company is doing surprisingly well. I hired a team of 12. We moved into a renovated building downtown with exposed brick and those industrial windows that let in perfect morning light. I finally bought a car I actually wanted. Not to prove anything, just because I could. And I was happy, genuinely, quietly happy. The kind of happiness that doesn't need an audience. Then, on a Tuesday morning in March, my HR manager knocked on my office door. "Emma, we've got an interesting resume for the account manager position," she said, sliding a folder across my desk. "She's overqualified, honestly, but her cover letter is strong. Says she's looking for a change from corporate culture. Wants something more meaningful." I opened the folder and felt the world tilt. Michelle Harper, my brother's wife. Her resume was impressive, I'd give her that. 7 years at a Fortune 500, management experience, strong portfolio. The kind of candidate we'd normally jump at. Her cover letter talked about wanting to work for a company with soul and purpose, about believing in the mission of supporting smaller businesses that make communities thrive. It was good. Almost good enough to make me forget every dismissive comment, every pitying look, every time she'd acted like I was playing pretend while the adults did real work. Almost. "Schedule her for an interview," I said calmly. "Friday afternoon." My HR manager raised an eyebrow. "You know her?" "She's my sister-in-law." "Oh," a pause. "Should we—" "Treat her exactly like any other candidate," I said. "If she's qualified, she's qualified. If she's not, she's not." The truth was, I didn't know what I felt. Anger, satisfaction, some twisted combination of both. Michelle had applied to work at my small business. The same woman who'd smiled while my brother mocked my ambitions now wanted a seat at the table I'd built myself. I spent the next 3 days torn between pettiness and principle. The petty part of me wanted to reject her application outright, to give her a taste of dismissal. The principled part, the part I'd worked so hard to build, whispered that I was better than that my company's success wasn't about proving anything to people who'd doubted me. It was about building something that mattered. By Friday, I decided to meet her myself, not as her sister-in-law, as the CEO of the company she wanted to join. She arrived 15 minutes early, wearing a navy suit that probably cost more than my first month's rent had. Professional, polished, nervous. I watched her through my office window as she sat in our waiting area, checking her phone, smoothing invisible wrinkles from her skirt. When my assistant brought her in, Michelle's carefully constructed composure cracked for just a second. Her eyes widened. "Emma." "Michelle." I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "Please, sit." She did, and for a moment we just looked at each other. The air felt thick with unspoken history. "I didn't realize you'd be conducting the interview," she said finally. "It's my company," I replied evenly. "I interview all senior hires personally." She nodded, recovering quickly. "Of course, that makes sense." I glanced down at her resume, though I'd already memorized every line. "Your experience is impressive. 7 years at Hartwell and Crane. Management track, strong performance reviews." I looked up. "So why leave?" Michelle folded her hands in her lap. "I'm looking for work that feels more purposeful. Hartwell is all about numbers and shareholders. I want to be part of something that actually helps people build something real." The irony was so thick I almost laughed, but I kept my face neutral, professional. "And you think Bloom is that place?" "I do." She leaned forward slightly. "I've been following your company for the past year. The work you did for Riverside Bakery. That campaign was brilliant. You helped them triple their online orders. And the rebranding for Martinez Hardware. That store had been dying for a decade, and now they're thriving. This is the kind of impact I want to make. She'd done her homework. I had to give her that. But something about her delivery felt rehearsed, like she'd practiced this speech in front of a mirror. You do realise, I said carefully, that this position would mean a significant pay cut from what you're making now, about 40% based on your current salary. A flicker of something, surprise, discomfort, crossed her face. I'm aware, but not everything is about money. I sat back in my chair. No, it's not. The interview continued for another 30 minutes. I asked her about her management style, her experience with client relations, her understanding of brand strategy for small to mid-sized businesses. She answered well, better than well, honestly. She was competent, experienced, and her skill set would genuinely benefit my team. But there was something else humming beneath our professional exchange. An unspoken tension that had nothing to do with marketing and everything to do with family dinners and dismissive laughter, and the words, everyone has to start somewhere. As the interview wound down, I asked her one final question. Why do you really want to work here, Michelle? She blinked. I told you, no, I mean really. Not the rehearsed answer, not the mission statement you memorized from our website. Why did you apply to work at my company? For the first time, her polished exterior cracked completely. Her shoulders sagged slightly. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter, more honest. Because I'm drowning, she said. Daniel and I, things aren't good. He's never home. When he is, he's on his phone or talking about work. We don't talk anymore. Not really. And Hartwell, it's toxic. All performance metrics and office politics. I wake up every day dreading it. She met my eyes. I saw what you've built here. A team that actually seems happy. Work that matters. And I thought, maybe I could be part of something like that. Something real. The raw vulnerability in her voice caught me off guard. This wasn't the woman who'd dismissed my dreams. This was someone exhausted, searching for meaning, trying to find her way out of a life that looked perfect on paper, but felt hollow. I should have felt triumphant. This was the moment, the powerful reversal where I got to be the gatekeeper, where Michelle Harper had to ask me for something instead of looking down at my choices. But instead, I just felt tired. Tired of holding on to anger. Tired of letting old wounds dictate present choices. I'll be honest with you, I said. Part of me wants to reject this application. Not because you're unqualified, you're not, but because of history. Because of how you and Daniel treated my work, my choices, me. Michelle's face flushed. Emma, I held up a hand. Let me finish. That part of me is small and petty, and I've spent years building a company that's better than my worst impulses. I hire people who are right for the job, period. Not people I'm trying to punish. Not people I'm trying to prove something to. I paused, studying her face. She looked genuinely anxious now, her professional mask completely gone. You're qualified for this position, I continued. Your experience would strengthen our team. But I need you to understand something. If you work here, you're not Daniel's wife or my sister-in-law. You're an employee of Bloom. You'll be held to the same standards as everyone else. You'll work under Sarah Chen, our Director of Client Services. You'll start at the bottom of the management track, regardless of your previous titles. And if you can't handle that, if you can't show up every day ready to work without the baggage of family dynamics, then this isn't the right place for you. Michelle was quiet for a long moment, then she nodded slowly. I can handle that. And Emma, I'm sorry. For how we treated you, how I treated you. I was so caught up in looking like I had everything together that I didn't see how dismissive we were being. You built something incredible, and I was too insecure to acknowledge it. The apology surprised me, not because it wasn't deserved, it was, but because I'd never expected to hear it. People like Michelle and Daniel didn't usually apologize. They just moved through life assuming their perspective was the only one that mattered. We'll be in touch by Monday, I said, standing to signal the interview's end. Thank you for coming in. She stood too, hesitating at the door. Emma, regardless of what you decide, thank you for seeing me, for giving me a real interview instead of just... I don't know, I wouldn't have blamed you if you'd thrown my application in the trash. After she left, I sat at my desk for a long time, watching the afternoon light shift across the exposed brick walls. My phone buzzed with messages, client updates, team questions, the normal rhythm of running a business. But I ignored them all, turning Michelle's words over in my mind. I called my leadership team together that evening, Sarah, Marcus from Creative, and Jamie from Operations. I told them about the situation, about Michelle's qualifications, about our history. What do you think? I asked them. Sarah spoke first. Her experience would be valuable, but team dynamics matter more than resume lines. If there's personal history that could create tension, it could, I admitted. But it also might not. People change. Situations change. Marcus leaned back in his chair. You've always said you wanted to build something different here, something that gives people room to grow. Maybe that includes giving second chances to people who didn't see your value before. Jamie nodded. Plus, if she's good at her job, that's what matters. We can't turn away qualified candidates because of old grudges. That's not who we are. They were right, all of them. I'd built Bloom on principles that were bigger than my ego, believing in people, creating opportunities, doing work that mattered. Rejecting Michelle purely out of spite would be betraying everything I'd worked for. Over the weekend, I made my decision. Monday morning, I called Michelle myself. The position is yours if you want it, I said. Same conditions we discussed. You start in 2 weeks. Her relief was audible. Thank you, Emma. I won't let you down. Don't thank me. Just show up and do good work. The interesting part came later that week, at a family dinner I'd agreed to attend for my mother's birthday. It was the first one I'd been to in months. Daniel was already holding court when I arrived, talking about some acquisition his firm was handling. Michelle sat beside him, quieter than usual. When I walked in, she gave me a small, almost conspiratorial smile. My mother fussed over me, pleased I'd come. My father asked about the business, with slightly more interest than usual, and Daniel, predictably, found a way to steer the conversation back to himself within minutes. It wasn't until dessert that Michelle spoke up. I have some news, she said, her voice cutting through Daniel's monologue about quarterly projections. I'm leaving Hartwell and Crane. I've accepted a position at Bloom Marketing. The table went silent. My mother's fork paused halfway to her mouth. My father looked confused. And Daniel stared at his wife like she'd just announced she was joining the circus. You're what? He said. I'm going to work for Emma's company. Michelle's voice was steady, calm, as an account manager. Michelle. Daniel's tone had that warning edge, the one that said, we'll discuss this later. That's not, you didn't mention. I'm mentioning it now. She glanced at me, then back at him. It's a good opportunity. The work is meaningful, the culture is strong, and honestly, I'm excited about it. My mother tried to smooth things over with some bright comment about how nice it was that we'd be working together. My father mumbled something about family businesses, but Daniel just sat there, his jaw tight, his eyes moving between Michelle and me like he was trying to solve an equation that didn't make sense. Finally, he turned to me. Is this some kind of joke? You hired my wife. She applied, I said evenly. She was qualified. We made an offer. She accepted. That's how hiring works. This is... He stopped himself, clearly struggling to articulate what he was feeling. Embarrassment, anger, the humiliating realization that his wife had chosen my small business over her prestigious corporate job. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. Michelle. He turned to her. You're taking a massive pay cut to work for a company I believe in, Michelle interrupted. Her voice was firm now, with an edge I'd never heard from her before. For a CEO who's built something remarkable, yes, Daniel, I'm serious. I watched my brother's face cycle through emotions. Shock, anger, something that looked almost like shame. For years, he'd positioned himself as the successful one, the one who'd made the right choices, and now his wife was publicly choosing my path over his. My mother tried to change the subject. Dinner limped to an awkward conclusion. Daniel barely spoke for the rest of the evening. As I was leaving, Michelle caught me in the hallway. That was harder than I expected, she admitted quietly. Are you sure about this? I asked. Not the job. I mean, staying with him. You don't seem happy. She smiled sadly. I'm not sure about anything anymore, but I'm sure about wanting to do work that matters. And maybe seeing what you've built will help me figure out what I actually want, not what I'm supposed to want. Michelle started 2 weeks later. Sarah took her under her wing, teaching her our systems and philosophy. To her credit, Michelle dove in without pretension. She showed up early, stayed late, asked questions, and treated everyone on the team with genuine respect. She was good at her job, really good. Within a month, she'd helped land 2 significant clients by building relationships other team members had struggled with. She understood corporate psychology in a way the rest of us didn't, could speak the language of bigger businesses while translating our boutique approach into terms they understood. The team liked her. That was the surprising part. I'd worried there might be awkwardness or that people would treat her differently because of our family connection. But Michelle kept work and personal separate with a discipline I had to admire. At the office, she was just another team member. 3 months in, she came to my office with a proposal. I've been thinking, she said, sitting across from my desk with a notebook full of ideas. We're great at serving small to mid-sized businesses, but there's a whole tier of larger companies that want what we offer: authenticity, real connection, mission-driven campaigns. But they need more structure, more data, more proof that our approach scales. What if we created a separate division specifically for those clients? Higher investment, higher return, but still maintaining our values. I read through her proposal. It was thorough, well-researched, and honestly brilliant. She'd identified a gap in our services and developed a strategy to fill it without compromising what made Bloom special. This is good, I said, really good. Let's develop it further and present it to the leadership team. She grinned, a genuine, excited smile I'd never seen on her before. Thank you. And Emma, thank you for giving me this chance. I know it wasn't easy. The proposal she'd developed became our corporate authenticity division. Within 6 months, it accounted for 30% of our revenue. Within a year, we doubled our team size and moved into a second floor of our building. Daniel and I didn't speak much during this time. Family dinners became less frequent, and when they did happen, he found excuses to leave early. My parents stopped comparing us, maybe because the comparison had become uncomfortable in ways they didn't know how to address. Michelle eventually left him. It didn't happen dramatically or suddenly, just a slow dissolution of a marriage that had been more about image than substance. She moved into her own apartment, started therapy, and threw herself into work with a purpose I recognized because I'd lived it myself. One evening, almost a year after she'd started at Bloom, she knocked on my office door. Most of the team had gone home. The building was quiet except for the soft hum of computers and the distant sound of traffic below. "Can I ask you something?" she said, leaning against the doorframe. "Sure." "Why did you really hire me? I've thought about it a lot, and I still can't figure it out. You had every reason to reject my application, to make me feel exactly as small as we made you feel. But you didn't. Why?" I considered the question. It was one I'd asked myself more than once. "Because I didn't build this company to prove something to people who doubted me," I said finally. "I built it to create something worth building. And holding on to anger, rejecting qualified candidates because of old wounds, that would have made this about them, about proving them wrong. I didn't want my success to be defined by their failure to see me. I wanted it to be defined by the work itself." Michelle nodded slowly. "You're a better person than I am." "I don't know about that. I think we're all just trying to figure out who we want to be. You're different now than you were 2 years ago. So am I." "Daniel asked me to come back," she said quietly. "Last week. Said he's been going to therapy, working on himself, wants to try again." "What did you say?" I said no. She smiled slightly. "Because I finally figured out that I don't want to go back to being the person I was with him. The person who measured worth in titles and salaries and how things looked from the outside. I like who I'm becoming here, working for something that matters, being part of a team that treats each other like human beings instead of assets." After she left, I stayed in my office, watching the city lights blink on as evening deepened into night. I thought about the girl I'd been at that anniversary party, swallowing humiliation in my parents' garden. I thought about the promises I'd made to myself. Not dramatic vows of revenge, just quiet commitments to build something undeniable. I'd done it, not by destroying anyone or proving anyone wrong, but by staying focused on what mattered, by building something real. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Your father and I would love to take you to dinner next week. Just us. We're proud of you, Emma. We should have said it sooner." I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to be petty, to let them sit with their years of dismissiveness, but that part was getting smaller every day, crowded out by the person I'd worked so hard to become. "I'd like that," I texted back. As I locked up the office and headed home, I realized something. Revenge isn't always about making others feel small. Sometimes it's about becoming so secure in your own worth that their opinions simply stop mattering. It's about building a life so full and meaningful that you don't have room to carry old grudges. Daniel never acknowledged what I'd built, never apologized for his dismissiveness. And eventually, I stopped waiting for it, because I'd found something better than his validation. I'd found my own. The best revenge isn't destruction. It's indifference. It's building something so good that you forget you were supposed to be proving something in the first place.